All right, let's talk about the basics of file I/O and text strings. Suppose you have a file and you want to read this into a Python program. Just as an example, I have a file here, data portfolio CSV, has some data in it. Let's say I want to get that into a Python program. How do I go about doing that? Well, some basics to do that. First of all, if you want to open up a file, there's a built-in function open that is used to do that. So what you can do is you can say, I want to open portfolio CSV. And then you give it a mode, like R for reading, W for writing. So what I'm doing here is telling Python I want to open a file for reading. Once you've opened up a file, you get a file object that you can work with. And there are a couple of different ways of working with that. If I do a read operation like that, it will grab the entire file all at once and put it into a text string for me. You would see the contents of the file in that string. If I were to print it out, it would look more like the original file. Another way that you can work with files is you open up the file, again, open up for reading, and then you do a for loop on it, and this will cause the file to be read line by line. So what's going to happen here is I will go one line at a time over the contents of the file, and you'll see it kind of print out like that. Essentially, the line, it's like one row of data in the file. So you have these two different ways of working with files that are quite common. Open it up, either just read the whole file, or you open it and you go line by line. We're going to start with that. One thing that you will notice with files is that there is this pattern where I have to open the file, like you do the open step, and then I do some kind of operation involving reading, and then I have to do this close at the end. That closing step is actually essential for the operating system. I mean, you're telling it that you're no longer using the file. And it also turns out that that's a step that's easy to forget or to mess up. Because of that, there's one other way of working with files that is quite common, which is to make use of the with statement. So you might see somebody writing statement like with open some file as f, and then you read the file the same way that you did before. Turns out that that with statement establishes sort of a context where you're going to use the file, and it will automatically take care of closing the file when you're done. So that is actually the more kind of modern way that you would work with files in Python. So I'm going to continue to use that. Now, once you've gotten some data from a file, let's talk about working with it a little bit. Let's say you had a line of data that you got out of a file. One of the things that you're going to start doing is maybe some text manipulation to either clean up this data, extract items from the data, convert things, and so forth. And in order to do that, I have to say a little bit about working with text strings. First thing, if you want to define text in Python, you typically enclose it in quotes. Like if you're just writing a program and you want to have some text, you enclose text in quotes, or you enclose it in double quotes. Either one of those are fine. And then to manipulate text, one of the ways that you can do it is to treat it like an array of characters. Turns out if you start indexing into a string, you will pull out individual letters. So like A0 gives me H and A1 gives me E. You can use negative indexes to go from the end of a string backwards. So -1 gives me the last letter. -2 gives me the second to last. You can also do some things like slicing of the data. Turns out if you put in a range of indices like that, you'll get a range of characters. You can leave off some of the indexes if you want, like A:5 will give you the first 5 letters. A -5: will give you the last 5 letters. So these are different things that I might start to do with this line of text here. I could try to slice that up to get different information out of it. Some other things about text that I'll just mention as well. Len will give you the length of a text string. So if I want to calculate a length of something, that will do that. You can also join strings together with things like the plus operator. So if I had C is equal to hello and D is equal to world, C plus D would concatenate those strings. Now, some other things that come up with text. Let's talk about cleaning up this line a little bit. One of the things that happens with files is you might want to get rid of extra characters. Like this line actually has a new line on the end of it. Maybe I want to get rid of that. Turns out that there's an operation strip that I can use to do that. What strip does is it gets rid of white space. So if your text has white space on the beginning or end, it will sort of clean that up. This also brings up an important point that if you do anything to a string, you have to save the result. It turns out that all operations concerning strings never modify the original string. Like that stripping operation did not change line. If I actually want to save the result, I maybe need to put it back into a variable. So that gives me the line stripped up. Some other things that you can do things like string replacement. Like if I wanted to replace the quote with a different character like dash, that would do that. Some other things that you can do is you can take a line and split it on a character of my choosing. So right there I'm saying, take the line and split it into parts. What's happening here is you now get a list that has like the different parts of that line that were separated by a comma. I could then address those using indexes there, like that. I could take that and further do things to clean up the line. Example, like this parts 0. If I wanted to get rid of the double quotes, I could ask Python to strip those away, strip the double quotes off. It helps if you type the variable correctly there. So they're a cleaned up part of it. I could do the same thing for parts 1. Again, I'm doing some steps to kind of clean up the data. I might do other things to clean up the data as well. I have some numbers in here like parts 2 and parts 3. If I wanted to do any kind of mathematical calculation with those, I can't do it, at least not to start with anyway. Like if I tried to do multiplication, Python will complain about that, saying, "What are you doing? You can't multiply strings." I could do things like convert those. I could say parts 2 is equal to int parts 2. I could convert the other one to a float. Again, what I'm doing is taking something that started off as input text, kind of split it up, doing different steps to sanitize it, different conversions with strings and so forth. These are some basic tools that you will use if you start working with files. When you start writing larger programs, you'll start using these in combination with some other things that we'll look at next.